Hey guys, welcome to my channel. We are reading Monster High Monster Rescue Go Get Lagoona by Misty Von Spooks. And I'm not sure if this is the first, yep, it is the first chapter. So, yeah, we are just going to start reading. Chapter 1. "Stop!" Draculaura suddenly cried. She yanked her hands off of the skullet right as it began to glow with pink light. Luckily, Draculaura's ghoul friends, Frankenstein, Claudine Wolf, and Cleo Denial followed her lead and let go of the skullet just in time. "Drac, what's wrong?" Frankie asked. "I thought we were on our way to find Lagoona." "Yeah, we were," Draculaura said slowly. "So what's the holdup?" asked Claudine, pushing her thick hair away from her face. "My curls are about to be as dried up as those old mummies. Time to go." None of the ghouls were fans of the relentless desert heat, but it seemed to hit Claudine even harder than the others. "I think we need to go back to Monster High first," Draculaura explained. "We should check my dad. You know how much he worries about us. He probably thinks we're mummified by now." "True," Frankie laughed, nodding. Her dangling lightning bolt earrings flashed in the sun. "And we should probably learn more about where Lagoona lives," Draculaura continued. "We can't just keep dashing off without doing our homework, if you know what I mean." "I think we've all learned our lesson on that one," Claudine said. "We definitely need to find out more about her location. What if we need special gear or stuff like that? If we learn anything from our trip to the desert, it's that we've got to be prepared for just about anything," added Frankie. "What do you think?" Draculaura said as she turned to Cleo. They'd all met Cleo for the first time just minutes before, and Draculaura didn't want her newest girlfriend to feel left out. "Do you mind if we take a detour to Monster High before we start searching for Lagoona?" "Mind? Are you kidding?" Cleo replied. "That sounds golden. You know, I've been positively dying to get to Monster High." "Fantastic," Draculaura cheered. She leaned down and picked up the skullet again, as all the ghouls rested their fingertips against the skullet. Draculaura closed her eyes. "Monster High, Esco Monstrum." Whoosh! The tremendous swirl of wind swept around the ghouls as first Draculaura thought the sand circling them might be a tornado, but then she realized that it was just a skullet's enchantment at work. Then all of a sudden the monsters found themselves on the front lawn of Monster High. Draculaura gazed up at the school in amazement. It was not so long ago that the enormous mansion wasn't a school at all. It had started out as her home, or more accurately, her hiding place. Ever since the great monster fright flight, Draculaura's dad, Dracula, had insisted that they hid from humans, or normies, for their own protection. All the other monsters had gone into hiding too. It wasn't so bad for the first few centuries, but at the ages past, Draculaura grew lonely for school friends of her very own. Then on the night of Draculaura's very first flying lesson, everything had changed. Another monster, Frankie, who was just as eager for ghoul friends as Draculaura was, had spotted her. The ghouls had hit it off instantly. which had inspired Draculaura's most fantastic idea ever. A school just for monsters, a place where they could finally come out of the shadows to make new friends. It wasn't enough to renovate the big old house. Though, to truly be a monstrous success, Monster High would need students. And a lot of them. That's how Frankie and Draculaura found Claudine. With help from Frankie, Draculaura posted a message on Monster Web. She hoped that at least one or two other monsters would respond. To Draculaura's surprise, the response was overwhelming. Monsters all over the world were hoping to come out of hiding, and Monster High was where they wanted to do it. As their messages flooded Draculaura's inbox, she vowed to rescue each and every one with the powerful monster mapalog. It's an enchantment skullet. Draculaura and her ghoul friends had the ability to go anywhere in the whole wide world to find the monsters who were so eager to attend Monster High. The mapalog wasn't perfect, though. It transported the ghouls near where they needed to be, and the rest of us was up to them. A wild trip to the desert had led them to a rescue of Cleo Denial, an Egyptian princess who'd been trapped in her tomb for a whole millennia. Next to the whole list was a monster named Lagoona Blue. But just before they used the skullet to transport them to Lagoona's homeland, Draculaura realized that they needed to stop by Monster High. Drac glanced anxiously at Cleo, wondering what she thought of her new school. She tried to see Monster High from the towers of Torrance. Torrance to the sweeping staircases and arched doorways. Through Cleo's eyes. It's big, but is it a pyramid big? Draculaura wondered. Cleo's a royal ghoul who spent her entire life surrounded by the unlimited luxuries. What will we do if she thinks Monster High is a disappointment? Draculaura didn't have to wonder for very long. Cleo beamed at her as she stared up the huge mansion. "It's so cute!" she exclaimed. Her gold blings clicked as she clapped her hands with excitement. "Which floor is mine?" "Floor?" Draculaura echoed. Nobody has her own floor. But the dorm rooms are pretty fantastic." "Oh, dorm rooms, of course," Cleo said, trying to laugh off her mistake. "Why didn't I think of that?" "Come on," Draculaura said, linking arms with the newest ghoul friend. "Let's go inside. I can't wait to show you everything." "And I absolutely can't wait for a mummy oh my gosh, what the heck? Mocha," Claudine added as she and Frankie fell into step behind them. As the ghouls approached the first door, it swung open with an ear-splitting creak. Dracula stood in the doorway. "You're back," he explained, barely able to conceal his relief. Come in, and welcome. Dad, please meet our newest student, Cleo Denial," Draculaura said. Then she turned to Cleo. "This is my dad, also known as the headmaster of Monster High." "Well, now I never expected we'd be hosting royalty. It's an honor, Your Highness," Dracula said as he bowed jokingly. However, it seemed to Cleo that there was nothing joking about it. Cleo nodded raggedly to acknowledge Dracula. "You are very welcome," she replied. "I know you haven't had much time to prepare for my arrival, so I'd be happy to discuss my requirements with the head servant after he or she has unpacked my suitcase." "Uh-oh," Draculaura thought. "Is she for real?" From the looks of Frankie's face, Draculaura knew she wasn't the only one concerned. Dracula began, momentarily speechless. "We don't have any servants here, but you ghoul friends will be happy to help you unpack," Frankie said brightly. "Oops," Cleo said with a nervous laugh. "Thanks, ghouls. That's even better." "Mr. D," Claudine explained. You will not believe what happened when we went back to the desert. I want to hear everything, he replied. Let's fire up the Mummy Mocha machine. That sounds good. Amazing. I'll take mine with extra drizzle of chocolate syrup and not too much ice. That's very important, Cleo announced. Everyone turned and looked at her. Well, we actually make our own mummy mochas here, Draculaura explained. Cleo blinked in surprise. You do? She asked in astonishment. You make them yourself? But how? It's easy, Frankie assured her. I'll teach you. Dracula led them up to the crypteria where the mummy mocha machine was set up in the corner. These are the controls, Frankie exclaimed. As Cleo looked at Gamely, it's all very self-explanatory. Just program in whatever you'd like to drink, and I got this, Cleo interrupted as she squinted her coal-trimmed eyes to read the options. I cannot wait to practice all these. What do you call them? Do-it-yourself projects? Then she confidently punched a few of the buttons on the control pad, and Mummy Mocha machine rumbled to life, clanking and hissing as it prepared her drink. Oh, I almost forgot, Cleo cried suddenly. I like my Mummy Mochas made with extra hot chocolate syrup poured over 4 and half ice cubes. I wouldn't, Frankie began, but it was too late. Frankie was already jabbing the buttons, trying to reprogram her order. The machine started to shake, and terrible groanings noise filled the crypteria. Take cover, Frankie yelled. Draculaura and the ghouls dove under the table and covered their heads. Boom! The door on the Mummy Mocha machine bursted open as the fountain of chocolate goop exploded out of the machine. Drops of chocolate ran over the crypteria. With the ghouls shrieked in alarm, then silence filled the room. Slowly, cautiously, the ghouls peeked out from under the table. A plume of smoke unfurled from the Mummy Mocha machine as a gooey river of chocolate syrup spread across the tiled floor. Uh-oh, Claudine finally said. Cleo swallowed hard. I'm sorry, ghouls. I guess I still have a lot to learn, she said. Draculaura wrapped her arm around Cleo's shoulder. We will do, she said. That's why we're here. And now seems like a good time to get started, Dracula announced. He crossed the room carefully, dodging the pudding of chocolate syrup, and reached into the broom closet. From the twinkle in his eye, Laura could tell that her dad wasn't really happy, even though the ghouls had managed to mess up the brand new crypteria right after they returned. Frankie, would you take a look at the machine? Dracula continued. I hope it wouldn't be too hard to repair. On it, Frankie replied. Then Draculaura handed out the mops. There was one for Draculaura, one for Claudine, and one even for Cleo. Cleo hesitated before she took it. So you just push it around the floor? She asked doubtfully. A little soap helps too, Draculaura said cheerfully. But instead of a little soap, she squirted a bit too much on the floor. Soon the crypteria was filled with floating bubbles, which made the ghouls laugh as they mopped up the mess. Frankie finished fixing the Mummy Mocha machine before the other ghouls finished cleaning up the mess, which meant the minute they put away the mops, she was ready for them. Who's thirsty? She asked, as she held out the tray with 4 perfect Mummy Mocha topped with whipped cream. Worth the wait, Claudine said, sighing over her first sip. Cleo reached up to pop one last bubble that was floating overhead. I honestly can't believe it, she said. Frankie fixed the Mummy Mocha machine all by herself, and the rest of us cleaned the floor. I feel like we can do anything. Speaking of anything, Draculaura began. The other ghouls turned to look at her. What should we do to get ready for Lagoona's rescue? Drac continued. The possibilities are endless, Claudine said. And so are the risks. added Frankie. We know practically nothing about Lagoona or her location, and that just means we got a lot to learn, Draculaura said. Lucky for us, we're here in the right place, joked Frankie. Draculaura grinned at her friend. Thanks to Monster High, the ghouls had their chance to learn everything they needed to know, and the school hadn't even started yet. Alrighty, guys. That was chapter 1. We're going to do chapter 2 next. Chapter 2. Far, far away, the sun had just begun to rise, casting a faint pink light over the deserted beach. It was Lagoona Blue's favorite time of the day, and the only time when she could leave the ocean and explore the sandy shore as much as she wanted. But as soon as the sun was up, Lagoona had no choice but to dive deep into the water. That's when the tourists with their big cameras and the locals with their surfboards would flood the beach. Lagoona had heard enough stories about the great monster flight to understand why she had to stay far, far away from normies. But that didn't mean she had to like it. Lagoona worked quickly, moving from dun to dun as she posted her signs. Warning, tropical cyclone approaching. Avoid the ocean until further notice. Lagoona didn't sign her name, of course, but she always left her mark at the very bottom of the sign. She had added her very favorite doodle, a circle Q wave that was about to crest. Lagoona added the symbol everywhere she could. It was even in her email signature. Lagoona had no idea if normies would pay attention to her warnings, but she certainly hoped so. The tropical cyclone that was brewing far out to sea was big, and that meant it was bad. If it veered off its current course, things would be fine. Sea creatures, after all, knew how to handle tropical cyclones, even the worst ones. But if it continued towards land, Lagoona knew in her heart that there wasn't a single normie in the world who could handle the furious winds and monstrously big wave a tropical cyclone could cause. Lagoona glanced wearily at the sky. The pink color had dimmed. It wouldn't be long until the golden sun popped up, sending her back to the deepest depth until tomorrow. She started to move even faster, racing against the inevitable sunrise. One more sign, Lagoona muttered under her breath. If she listened closely, she could hear the car engine approaching. She shoved the sign post into the sand and ran as fast as she could back to the ocean. Just as the first beachgoers appeared at the edge of the dunes, had they seen her? Lagoona wasn't sure. She wasn't about to wait around and find out. In truth, though, Lagoona wasn't too worried about it with her light blue skin and voluminous blonde curls. It was easy for Lagoona to blend in to the sand and the sea when she needed to. Besides, the normies were almost certainly too interested in checking out the waves to notice that the sea ghouls slipped into the ocean. As the daughter of the sea monster, Lagoona knew how lucky she was. She could breathe just as easily underwater as she could on land. That meant that she could enjoy the best of both worlds whenever she wanted, as long as she stayed out of sight of the normies. She smiled to herself as she glided through the water. If normies ever caught sight of her iridescent scales, they wouldn't believe their eyes. Lagoona didn't surface again until she reached the underwater grotto, where she lived with her family, the other sea monsters in the Great Barrier Reef. It wasn't quite as lonely as it sounded. Lagoona was friends with the other sea creatures in the Great Barrier Reef. Even a giant squid who was just as misunderstood by the normies as Lagoona and her family were. There were seahorses and starfish, schools of fish that numbered in 1,000, even sharks and whales. And it wasn't like Lagoona was by herself in addition to her mom and dad. She had 2 little sisters and a school of brothers, but there were no other monsters in the Great Barrier Reef who were her age, and that was what really made her feel all alone. Even when surrounded by thousands of other sea creatures, for the first time in her life, though, Lagoona had an unshakable feeling that all of that was about to change. She would never forget the thrill of hope that was unfurled in her heart when she first read Draculaura's message about the new monsters-only school. She started, in fact. Lagoona had shrieked so loudly that both her parents had come swimming, terrified that an adventurous normie had scuba dived right into their secret undersea home. At first, her parents had understood why she was so excited to live in the study of Monster High. They didn't understand why she wasn't every bit as happy as they were in their spacious sea home. Some, though, Lagoona had managed to convince them as she needed to go to Monster High. Now, all she had to do was wait for a response from Draculaura. When Lagoona finally surfaced, she realized that she'd missed the sunrise entirely. A heavy bank of clouds had blown in on the stiff wind while she was underwater. The waves were already chopper than before, with foamy white caps like warning flags. She hoped that the normies on the beach would notice her sign. Scanning the horizon, Lagoona realized that there weren't any sailboats or cruise ships as far as she could see. Even fishing boats knew better to risk being out in the tropical cyclone, which meant one very important thing to Lagoona. It was time to grab her surfboard. Lagoona dove back under the waves and swam around the coral reef until she reached the grotto's entrance, which was almost undetectable unless you knew where to look. Alrighty. Her little sisters, Kepi and Ebi, were at the computer. Lagoona's heart skipped. "Any news?" she asked. "Did Draculaura respond to my message?" "No," Kelpie said. "And G-Day you do too." Lagoona tried to squeak her disappointment. "Oh, how come you two are hovering around my computer?" she asked. "We were waiting for you," Ebi replied. "You're always checking for new messages on your computer, so we figured this was the best place to find you." Lagoona smiled sheepishly. It was true that she had become a little bit obsessed with checking for new messages on Monster Web. No, make that a lot obsessed. She couldn't help herself. After all, Draculaura's response could come at any moment, though, in her heart. Lagoona was starting to worry. Several days had passed, yet there was still no word from Draculaura, or from anyone else at Monster High. How much longer would she have to wait? Kelp's voice interrupted Laguna's thoughts. Everyone else is surfing already. Did you see the sky? She's asking with a mischievous smile. Did I ever? Lagoona replied. Go on. Grab your boards. If this is just a short squeal, we don't want to miss another moment. Dad doesn't think it's a squeal at all, Abby told her. He thinks a cyclone's coming. Fantastic, Lagoona replied. That means we can have an even longer surf sesh than usual. Lagoona grabbed her board and was about to follow her sisters into the wave when she glanced at her computer again. Won't hurt to check it once more, she thought to herself. Just approaching the computer made her heart quicken. But when she refreshed, her monster web mailbox was still empty. Lagoona really expected that a message from Draculaura would arrive in the last 30 seconds. But then again, what if something is wrong with Monster Web connection? Lagoona thought suddenly. It was tricky to get a connection this deep underwater, and it wouldn't be the first time Lumen's storm had caused the currents to go haywire. Lagoona decided to adjust her settings and run the system check to see. Maybe I'll send another message to Draculaura, Lagoona thought. She didn't want to seem super needy, but if something had gone wrong and Draculaura didn't receive her first message, Lagoona fins brushed against the keyboards as she started to type. G-Day, Draculaura. Just a quick hi before I head out for a surf session with my sibs. Really excited about Monster High still. I can't wait to hear from you. XO Lagoona. Lagoona! Evie's voice carried through the water. Come on, we're missing all the fun. On my way, Lagoona called back. The system scan would take a couple hours, and she didn't want to disappoint her sisters. It was scary sweet of them to wait for her before they hit the wave. As Lagoona swam to the surface with her board tucked under her arm, she found that she was even more excited about surfing through the squale. After all, Lagoona had a feeling that she needed to get in as many surf sessions as she could before it was time to move to Monster High. Alright, and that is the end of Chapter 2. We will continue Chapter 3 in a different video, and I hope you guys have a good day.